All right, welcome to Pass the Mic. It is Friday, June 28th, 2024, episode 121. Welcome, Mike Gervasi.
Great to be here. I just wonder if this is, aside from the snafu we just had, if this is a family-friendly show. Are you going to be talking about the shirt you're wearing?
Oh, that is a Father's Day gift. You like that? And I got this hat's brand new. Brand new. You can see how flat the brim is.
Uh-huh.
But the shirt, we are on Zoom,
Yeah.
and it says, "A beer may help." I saw this. This is from a Steel City, I think is the name of the shirtery place that it's out of Pittsburgh. My family got me this for Father's Day. I think it's a pretty nice shirt. It just says a beer may help, so it is still family friendly. It doesn't say a beer will help. It says may. It's possibly.
May. Okay. All right. Fair.
Feedback and errors. We're going to start with those of you that are watching us. First feedback. Coach Sikora talked about what? Why are you wearing a headset this week?
He was so angry that he gave up. We can't lose our loyal listeners. He gave up on listening to the show because of me.
Maybe that's why we haven't been getting the feedback. He claims that your audio. First of all, we acknowledge when we're on Zoom, the audio is not as good as Studio B. There's
Right.
background noise, this or that. You may be hearing Ella bark in the background right now. I don't even know. Somebody must be out front. So we're not in a closed studio. I wear AirPods when I do the episode, so I think mine was okay. You were using the computer speaker microphone, which probably, but Coach Sikora said, I can hear it fine when I'm on my walk or doing whatever, listening to the car. I got to turn the volume up, but I think he was doing like some heavy, maybe a big bike riding session, or I don't know. Who knows? I don't know what he was doing. Some, something that was loud, that the background noise he couldn't handle.
Maybe he was trying to listen to a Tiger game at the same time, and the loud wild Tiger fans were drowning out the Pass the Mic show.
Cheering in the background may have. Other feedback and errors. Max, great feedback right away, very early, even though we were off, right? So we didn't know how early the feedback would be coming. It was very early. I was out on my walk that morning, and he was pinging me with the text. He prefers the cold. He's on my side with that. But your topic of which athlete that you would love to see was a big springboard this week. That got a lot of
feedback on that.
And Jackie Robinson was his. So another
Right.
baseball guy. Great choice. I mean, that's a really cool choice. Gary Bailey, then Mr. Bailey Sr., also commented for him. I said it was Wilt Chamberlain, and said his records are I believe he called the records untouchable or unbreakable, some of the records he has. And so that would be one that he would like to see. Do you got some more feedback on your end?
Yeah, quite a bit actually. Max also mentioned he didn't believe that you knew Tretch from Naughty by Nature. He called you out on that one.
I didn't know him. It was about now I'm drawing a blank on Flavor
OPP,
Flav and
yeah,
Chuck
you know
D.
me.
Yeah, no, it was about I said I knew Chuck D of
Public Enemy.
Public Enemy, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I brought up the Pirates hat. He brought up the
You really
Phillies
sound
hat.
like it right there.
Well, I mean, I was blanking on the name of the group. I had the individuals.
All right. DMX is from his brother's hometown.
Just like Bobby Brown.
New edition.
Yeah.
DMX is from his brother's hometown, Greenville, South Carolina, same as Kevin Garnett, the famous NBA star, former NBA star. His first game, he saw Dr. J in person, not his first game. His first person in game was the Pistons versus Lakers, Showtime Lakers. I wonder who won that game. Antoine commented, Travis is one of our guys on the text thread that I mentioned, kind of slid in there. My first girlfriend was his sister. So that
sort of went like unnoticed during the episode.
Under the radar. Both Max and Elizabeth Pate knew that Coach, Max actually mentioned Screaming Eagles, which was the team name. Elizabeth Pate prefers the heat to the cold. Also, I want to give a shout out to her. So, and I'm going to kind of not violate FERPA a little bit here, but we have a common friend, James. She and I do. James does a little bit of work at basketball camp with us. He's very good friends with Coach Rob Raymond. And James mentioned he's had some things going on at U of M Hospital. The work that the nurses do, specifically mentioning Elizabeth Pate, is unrecognized, but it's amazing. And Elizabeth was so happy to hear that, so I want to give a shout out to the nurses. And I we've talked about Nurses Week before, but she was so happy to hear that. So I wanted to mention that.
Can I
Tony
piggyback on that
Saavedra.
real quick before
Yeah, go
you get
ahead.
to Tony?
Yeah.
Because I totally agree. I think about not, with my dad's recent passing, and no offense to doctors, doctors are obviously great. They go through a lot of training, but the nurses are who you interact with
Yeah.
on the majority of the time. I think back to both of my kids being born, right? Like the surgeon, because at least I had a C-section, the OBGYN, I mean, yes, obviously you saw right when the baby was born and then they come in and check. But throughout the couple of days that we were there, it was all nurses, that
Right.
and to me, I mean, they are, I don't underappreciate them. I would never I could never handle the job. I'll admit that. So, I again definitely shout out to all nurses. They are
Yeah.
commendable profession. So yes, back
Uh,
to Tony Saavedra.
yeah, and you can go into the sports one, but he did mention he doesn't like the celebrations for everything. It reminds him of participation trophies. So I think that's a pretty interesting way of looking
But
at
his
it.
comment about, I agree with his comment because I sort of do downplay high school graduation, but he put a very good comment in there. I agree with him. It is a coming of age moment,
Rite
no
of
matter
passage,
what you
right?
decide to
Right.
do, a rite of passage. And I think
Yeah.
that's something I sort of left off. So I guess I see why that it is a celebration. And speaking of Tony, Patricia
Yeah.
Saavedra, his lovely wife, big Wings fan, big hockey fan.
Hmm.
Her athlete was Gordie Howe in his prime. That's who
Yeah.
she would love to have seen.
Right.
Which, by the way, yes, I guess in his prime, he played a long career. You might have been able to catch
Yeah.
the tail end of his
Right. Well, and actually,
career.
he played a line with the Detroit Vipers in the two. It
Yes,
wasn't into the two
I do
thousands
remember that like a little
or
publicity
maybe
stunt
late
thing.
nineties, but yeah.
Yeah.
Todd Bailey would have liked to have seen Babe Ruth and Jim Thorpe. There's Patricia. I want to make sure I get everybody in here. Oh, okay. A very big one here. Brittany Newick, former Carlson student,
Okay.
is now a teacher. She mentioned at her school, they call fifth grade a promotion. So it's not graduation. They're not
Oh, good.
celebrating. I think that's linguistically, I think that's very important. Um, and it's not a graduation. There is no kindergarten graduation at all.
Okay.
If nothing else, it's for fear of offending a lot of the students in her district. And we got to remember, we're all in different districts who don't
Yes.
move on. And so
Yeah.
a lot of the teachers band together for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, there it
All right.
is.
Excellent. Great feedback. Sorry, something's being delivered on my front porch right now. So I'm sure the dog is going to love that. Mike of the week. Who do you got this week?
Well, in honor of NBA draft week, I'm going way back, the Wayback Machine, 36 years to be exact. 1988 NBA draft, the Detroit Pistons in the second round selected Michael Williams out of Baylor, became an NBA champion with the Pistons, ended up having a decent career. He moved on after the first year. I believe he was taking the expansion draft, had 5 good years of double figure averages, went to Indiana, had a good career, was traded to Minnesota. So my Mike of the week is Mike Williams, former Detroit Piston, who was an NBA champion.
All right. Of course, tonight we are recording on Wednesday, the 26th. Draft is tonight. Um, big night. Hopefully, something good falls to the Pistons. Although there's the word on the street, right? This draft isn't very strong.
Not very good, and my hope is they just get a serviceable player like Mike Valeni, also on the wall, is hoping for they just swing for the fences and either take a French guy nobody's heard of who they could stash for a couple years and try to develop, who becomes a star, or is washing your car 2 years from now, so they're 3 years from now. So I hope for just a marginal role, not marginal, but a role player that can help this team now and down the road. So that's my hope tonight.
Okay, and odds are they're not moving because there's nothing really to move up for or back for, right? Like nobody
Well,
wants that
there's
fifth spot.
talk if a specific player, the big man out of UConn falls. I don't want to geek out too much here in the NBA draft, but if he falls, the Pistons will either take him or will trade down to allow a team to move up and get some assets. We have a new president of operations, some new guys around him, so we'll see. I do want to remind any of our younger listeners, this team was once a proud franchise, and the 16 plus years and counting of non-playoff victories is an anomaly in their history. This is a very, or there's only 7 NBA teams with more championships than the Pistons. And for young people, they have never seen, our high school kids have never seen this team compete. It's pretty crazy.
No, nope. Nate was born back the last time they were competing. So,
Yeah.
all right. Education topic this week, since we are in our second week of being off. I figured why not have a good discussion about the school calendar and thoughts about which gets thrown around a lot about year-round school. I think for the most part, even if you look at the entire United States, we are still based on the old calendar of being off in the summer and school starts. And now some places, Michigan is notoriously one of the later states, right? The
Mhm.
post Labor Day states.
Right.
Um, there, most schools start in late August. I think, like if you took nationwide, they start in late August and they're done by Memorial Day is the standard
Even
schedule.
and some even closer to mid-August, I think in some
Yeah,
places
like
too.
Florida, I know from being down
Yeah.
there, it's almost like you can almost say early August,
Right.
depending on what it is. But I mean, but there's still that idea of you're going like fall to early summer, then you're off for summer. That's
Mhm.
the rough schedule. So I just sort of want to know what your thoughts are on our current calendar, and what do you think is good about it? And then if you could set the calendar, if you were the chief of education for the state of Michigan, what would your ideal calendar be like as far as not time of day, but schedule of how school would work?
So I'm of the opinion that a lot of what we do is antiquated and is just done because it's what our parents did, whose parents did that as well. And so in a lot of ways, I am up for new ways of doing things. But that being said, so a lot of I looked this up and there's a lot more districts than I thought starting to do this year-round thing. And what year-round, it doesn't mean we're adding to the calendar, although some districts have, but it doesn't mean we're adding to the calendar any hours necessarily. It's just spreading those hours out a little bit more. Uh, and for starters, if the ultimate goal is to improve education of kids, surprisingly, and I was really surprised to see this, it really hasn't had in the areas that's been implemented. And admittedly, this is pretty limited in terms of the data that's out there, but it hasn't had much of an impact one way or another. Some districts are doing better, some districts are doing worse, but the general idea is the scores tend to be similar as to what they were before. So it hasn't improved student performance. It hasn't decreased it as well. Um, so I looked up some of the positives and negatives that are offered. And again, I don't want to spend too much time belaboring the point here, but some of the, again, obviously the negatives is it's not benefiting scores at all. Some of the parents have complained about providing childcare, that having childcare, as it's spread out more, everybody's kind of used to the schedule, and to change it up has created problems for people providing childcare for their kids because now that the school year spread out a little bit more. So there's that. Um, on the flip side, and this is something that was brought up. I heard Kristen mentioned this to me. I'm talking to former coach Crampton at Wyandotte, Mr. Crampton. We were talking about this in when we were in Europe. The idea of going 4 days a week, extending the days a little bit into those 4 days, and you know, um, maybe making the school year go a little bit longer, maybe a little bit longer to June, coming back a little bit earlier into August, and providing more of those breaks in between. So kids, teachers, so everybody has more time to recharge their batteries. And I think that's a fair point. I know, I don't know how you feel, but I know by May, for me, I'm ready to be done. And so in that regard, I can understand that point of view. The other thing is, as teachers, our time is somewhat limited when we get to travel. You're not taking a week-long vacation come
No, we
September
only
or
get 3 days off. Three
right,
days
right.
that are not part of the calendar.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of presenting both sides of the argument. I guess if you're asking me, and that's a part of this deal here, to make a decision, I would be okay extending the school year a little bit longer, coming back a little bit earlier if it meant more breaks in between. I know that in our district, as part of what was negotiated in that contract last year, we were thrilled to have those days, those just two
In
days in October that we normally
October.
don't
Yep.
get. That was a really nice break. I think if you had that opportunity, I think it'd be a good thing as well. So maybe more of that, as long as that's mixed in. I think that might improve performance all around from teachers and students. So I guess that would be my ideal situation. So it's not changing it too radically, but it's changing it enough that I think maybe all of us would have a little bit more gas in the tank late in the year.
Well, I'm glad you did the research. I didn't really do much research, but I think obviously that if the research said this way is great, there'd be a lot more change. There hasn't been a lot of push for everywhere going to year-round schools, right? I think a lot of things
Right.
people try stuff and you hope that it works. That's what happens a lot in education. Sometimes we retry stuff. Me personally, I've said this often, and mainly because I coach a fall sport. I know we've talked about this, like our boaters wouldn't like this idea, but all the kids are a big chunk of the high school, the kids are back by that second Monday in August, right? Your fall athletes, your
Mhm.
marching band kids,
Yeah.
so at that point, why not just that first week of fall sports have our PD days and whatever, and the second week. So the ultimate goal of not really changing the vacation days at all or anything, but starting there and ending at Memorial Day. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so August and May, which is what a lot of these schools are already doing that aren't year round, right? Like that's what when we talk about
Right.
Florida and stuff like that, that Memorial Day is sort of that end of year thing. And then all of a sudden, this year we worked what, 2 solid weeks into June, right?
Mhm.
This is the fourth week of June, and this is our second week off. Which, again, so all of a sudden, if you just bump 2 more weeks back before Labor Day, we would have been what, off right at Memorial Day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's not much that has to be done there. I know some people don't like that and claim that August weather is better, blah blah blah. But I mean, really, once you hit June 1st, it's pretty nice at that point. Like it's not 40 degrees here in Michigan, June 1st,
No,
June 2nd.
and I think that that has to be considered too. I know locally, Wyandotte has some buildings that were built a while ago.
Yeah.
Taylor had an issue a few years back. The rooms were 90 plus.
Yep. And
This isn't that's not
yeah,
conducive to learning.
we had some
Yeah,
warm days in June. So if you could
right,
avoid that, that
right.
would be nice. So that's sort of like what my, more realistic one is, I think that, because in the past we did start a little bit before Labor Day anyway. So
Hmm.
I think that's totally a possibility. When we talk about like, oh, why it changes, you look at universities, they're still really the same way too, right?
Hmm.
Like, I mean, they're done earlier. I mean,
Yeah,
they
mid to late
start,
April, right,
yeah, I mean, they're done by the end of April,
yeah,
graduation's that first week of May.
right.
So it's not like all of a sudden universities are saying, oh, we should be running longer sessions, with more days off. No, they do the 14 weeks, right? 14 or 15 weeks and get done. I sort of then just penciled sort of like a pie in the sky scenario of like, okay, you want to do year round. And you sort of mentioned one of my things, like, okay, how about 4 days a week with the kids? The fifth day is still a work day for us, so that all that other stuff that is sometimes uh, during planning time or during staff meetings or PD, all that stuff can be roped into that fifth day spread around. You know what I mean? And then you
Hmm.
have like maybe 3 weeks at December, like you said, like different breaks, like 3 weeks at December. I think you do need a break point at some point, sort of like it can't be, it doesn't need to be 3 months, but maybe like you're off from, mid-June through mid-July. So you get, that's your end point, you have your graduation and stuff, and then you're off for July 4th, but then you're back. I guess that would be sort of like the, uh, again, I think it could happen because, like I said, I think that for years we thought, oh, none of this stuff can happen. And then we went through COVID and we did a lot of unique, strange things that, sort of brought on online learning and this and that. I don't see why down the road, because we're not doing this for crops anymore, right? We're not working out in the farm field. That some point, somebody may look at this and decide, this is the way to go.
Right. Yeah.
What's your preference, though?
Um, I would probably go with you on that. If I had my ultimate preference, it'd probably be August, a little earlier in August, and get out around Memorial Day.
Yeah, like a standard, like what we're at now, and
Yeah.
I don't need, I don't, because there's some talks too, of like, okay, our current contract is like 182 days, I think, of work, or
Hmm.
185. I'm not sure based on PD. What if they say, okay, we'll pay you for 200 work days, and we're going to bump your salary in accordance with that? Would you want to do that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe give you a couple more extra days off. I guess I could possibly do that too, especially now that my kids are older.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a problem for me. But I think I would have no issue with the mid-August start and the done by Memorial Day.
Hmm.
Personally, hopefully that wouldn't cut off some track meets because
Too soon.
school would be out probably too soon.
Yeah.
All right. We'd love to hear what both educators and what parents think. I think you brought up a good point too about like daycare and watching kids and that sort of thing. How that works, because that's something that definitely has to be considered. All right. Overrated, underrated specifically comes from your great hot mic last week of athletes that you would want to see. So I figured, okay, overrated, underrated, pro athletes, any sport, anything. It doesn't even have to be pro athletes, amateur athletes, Olympics, gymnasts, anything you want. Who is your most overrated athlete? Or I'll even let you throw. I have two for my overrated athletes. I have two for both. So if you want two, you can go ahead.
I'm gonna go two underrated, but I'll keep one overrated.
In all honesty, one of my underrated, I did do some research and I'm pulling it from a list that somebody did a list.
Oh,
But
you
go ahead.
did. Okay.
Yeah, it
All right. So
was
my
like Bleacher Report
overrated
or something.
is gonna be overrated doesn't mean bad. NBA
Yes.
former NBA player Carmelo Anthony. You know,
Okay.
this is a
Could have been a
guy
Piston.
could have been a Piston, and that's part of why I'm saying he's overrated. First off, the Pistons probably wouldn't have drafted him. It probably would have been Chris Bosh. And I often hear what the Pistons might have been with him, and that's fair because there's that question, but they might not have won anything. There's a chance that first year they don't win because Tayshaun Prince, kind of blossomed in the system. He's not playing as much if they take Carmelo Anthony, and Tayshaun Prince was a phenomenal defensive player. They're not the same team with Carmelo Anthony. Now, the argument that I hear a lot of times is, okay, if he's a part of this team, he would have bought into the culture much more than where he went, which was Denver, which was a young team, and he didn't learn playing the right way until later on when former Piston Chauncey Billups went there. But he was just to me a numbers guy, a great scorer. I'm not taking anything away from that part of him, but if the ultimate objective is to win, I just don't think he was a winning basketball player. So, he never won a championship. Again, that's not always the individual player's fault. It's probably unfair, but it took him. They talked about again when Chauncey Billups went to Denver, that really provided him an opportunity to flourish. That was his sixth NBA season when he finally started defending and playing a lot harder and playing both ends of the floor. And, that kind of went away after, and he just became a virtual scorer. So for my overrated, it's Carmelo Anthony. Again, overrated doesn't mean bad, but I do not think he is as when I hear Piston fans say what we could have been with him, I'm a little skeptical of that.
Yeah. I always think that too. And I don't even know, do we get Rashid?
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? So we may not even have won one title is how I
Right.
sometimes feel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Okay, so my overrated, and I have two of them. I'm going to give you hints and see if you can guess. They both play or played for the same team, and they both only won one Super Bowl. And they're quarterbacks.
I'm drawing a blank. We don't want dead air here. That's not good for
Okay,
ratings.
it is Joe Namath and Aaron Rodgers are my overrated quarterbacks, overrated pro athletes. Okay. First of all, Joe Namath, if you look at, I mean, Aaron Rodgers has numbers. I'll at least give him that. If you go look at Joe Namath's numbers, he really wasn't that good of a quarterback. And
Yeah.
what he has going for them is the upset Super Bowl win that he
Yeah.
predicted and his
Right.
sort of persona. But as far as being a quarterback is concerned, shouldn't even be in the discussion of top probably 30 quarterbacks in all honesty. Just
Mm-hmm.
was not that good. Aaron Rodgers is a Rashad Mendenhall fumble away from having 0 Super Bowl titles, okay? And just a lot of stats. And I think that he gets a lot of hype of being like one of the top of all time, when in reality, I just don't think he is. I don't think he is. The Steelers, again, I'm not one of these guys that say there was a bad call or this or that. They got beat. The Packers beat them in that Super Bowl, but they were driving. Mendenhall, for not even like on a hard pop or anything, loses the ball, and just sort of, that's not the only reason they lost, but they lost the game. Probably, Roethlisberger threw a bad pick in that game as well. But I think that Aaron Rodgers is very close to right now, and again, his career lately speaks for itself, of being just a good quarterback. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when people fall back, and like you said, championships don't mean everything, but a lot of times in the NFL, that's sort of like that one thing.
Yeah.
Ask Philip Rivers and Eli Manning, the
Right.
difference between those two
Dan
guys, right?
Marino. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I personally think, and it's not just because he's a weirdo and goofball, but I think both of those guys, and ironically, both with the New York Jets, Namath with the New York Jets in the past, of course, and that's where Aaron Rodgers is. Well, at least for one play last year. We'll see how things go this year. So that's my overrated. I hope you're okay with it. I know that he was your guy. I don't think he is as much your guy anymore.
No, I would disagree. I think he was phenomenal in a lot of ways. The way he handled, to me, it was just like, Brett Favre clearly didn't want him there. I thought he handled that really well. And then he kind of did the same thing when they brought Jordan Love in. So it was kind of a history repeating itself
I mean,
sort of thing.
I don't think bad. I think this is a case. I'm not saying I think Joe
Yeah.
Namath isn't that good. Okay. Like I think, but he was overrated. I think Aaron Rodgers is obviously not a bad quarterback. I would have taken his numbers or this or that,
Yeah.
but I think he's overrated a little bit. So I think the title hits. No offense to all the Packer fans out there or Jets fans that listen to us. All right, underrated. Who do you got?
All right, so I really struggled with this. I wanted the part of me wanted to
It's
say
hard.
like
It's
it,
hard.
it
It's very
is.
hard
It's really hard.
because when you think, okay, this person's underrated, then you're like, oh no, they're really not. People think these people are good.
Well, so first off, you could make an argument for every great NFL offensive lineman ever. For
True.
every
True.
Penei Sewell jersey that I see right now, I see 10 Jared Goff jerseys. He's good for Goff. That's not taking
Yep.
anything away from him, but Penei Sewell might be the best offensive lineman in football. And
Yep.
it's really hard to do this. And I really struggled with this. I narrowed it to two, one of which I don't even feel that qualified to say. I just know when I'm going to start with hockey. And it's Mark Messier. He won 6 Stanley Cups, and I think that's forgotten a lot of times. And he left Edmonton. He won 4 with Wayne Gretzky, and Gretzky's largely considered the greatest of all time. There's some that I know that say he's the best team sport player of all time because statistically his numbers are so much better than everybody else's in his sport. He won 4, and that's not to say Messier is better, but Messier ends up winning 6. I kind of looked at some head-to-head statistics between the two, and Gretzky is just, again, he's so far and away better than everybody. But Messier was just, when you can't quantify whatever that it factor is, that it factor that Tom Brady had, and it seems like Messier had that too. In the '94 finals, he guaranteed, victory and delivered on it. I think his leadership characteristics were amazing, and so I'm going to go with him as my first one. And then a comparable one to me in basketball. And trust me, it pains me to say this. I can't stress that enough. Scottie Pippen was a great basketball player, and oftentimes when I'm arguing with younger people about Jordan versus LeBron, they will always bring up that the Bulls, the first year Jordan left, won 55 games. That's a pretty good regular season record. That was because Scottie Pippen had a borderline MVP season. Defensively, there's very few players on or off the ball that were better than him historically in the game. He then, in his, I believe, 14th season, went to the Portland Trailblazers in 2000, and they really came a fourth quarter collapse away from potentially winning the NBA Finals that year. And they were a very talented team. The aforementioned Rasheed Wallace was on that team. That was his peak of his career too. But Pippen he was so good in so many ways. And I don't know where I'd rank him historically, but I know that, again, when people talk about, what happened to Cleveland when LeBron left versus what happened to Chicago. Chicago was still, they were on the cusp. They ended up losing in 7 games to the Knicks, who ended up making the finals. And it was really a close game. Pippen is the reason for that. So I'm going with Pippen and Mark Messier as the 2 underrated athletes.
No, it's funny that you mentioned first offensive lineman because when I was trying to think of mine, I was first going to pick like Alan Faneca, a guard for the Steelers, who just dominated for years. But of course, only Steeler dorks would know that because he basically had the block that sprung Willie Parker in the Super Bowl, which is still, I think, the longest run in Super Bowl history. And then I was thinking throwing around Mario Lemieux because I feel like he got undershadowed a lot by Wayne Gretzky, who Mark Messier is even more undershadowed than Mario Lemieux. I felt that Mario Lemieux was, because of his, he had played with Hodgkin's disease and some back issues. I think like if he was there's always talk of if he was fully healthy, he would have at least come very close to those Gretzky numbers. But of course you can't figure that out. You can't what ifs, right? So I ended up going with the one that I picked myself. I figured I'm going to do something a little more recent and close to home because I saw a nice story about did you see the story of our own EMU's Max Crosby getting the field named after him up in Rynearson Stadium?
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes, so I'm going to pick him. He donated like money, and the field's now named him. And his wife were athletes at EMU. It was a pretty cool story. They came out, had much better luck breaking down the brick wall. They gave them the sledgehammers. Remember the famous, the first game where the Eastern and the guys couldn't get through it. Yeah. Max Crosby, like they did it. Yeah. So so Max Crosby is my underrated. I think right now because he sort of gets lost in the TJ Watt, Myles Garrett shuffle. Everyone wants to talk about TJ Watt, Myles Garrett. Part of it is I think they play each other 2 times a year, so they see each other. And lately, I mean, the Browns were good last year. The Raiders have sort of not been good. So I think right now, I said Max Bailey, Max Crosby, not Max Bailey, Max Crosby is sort of underrated right now. I think people are starting to get to know of him a little more. I think he might have been like the third place guy in that, but and sort of slipped under the radar, right? Like a round 4 draft pick. He's out there in Vegas. That's my underrated right now. Obviously, not in the grand scheme of all sports, but that's it. And then my other underrated is the one I went to, and I did the Google, right? Most underrated pro athletes of all time. And this one, again, because I'm not a baseball dork, but this one sort of hit home to me a little bit. And I know the Ren Dog's probably gonna be the one. Oh my God, I can't believe Peyote picked this guy. Stan Musial, uh, famous St. Louis Cardinal. Okay, and really, if you look at his numbers, he gets lost in that era of Joe DiMaggio. He is underrated because you think of this era of like the old legends of baseball. You don't hear his name as much as you hear
Right.
of, the Babe Ruths, the Ty Cobbs. I mean, Ty Cobb's
Lou
going way
Gehrig.
over, but Lou Gehrig.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't, but you hear it sometimes, but it's nowhere near the Joe DiMaggios. He was in St. Louis, so it's sort of like not that big of a deal. And his numbers are amazing. His numbers are amazing. And a little tidbit, he was born in the town right next to my dad's hometown of Manessa, and he was born in Denora, Pennsylvania. And the bridge that takes you from Manessa over the Monongahela River to Denora is the Stan Musial Bridge. My dad would point it out every time we drove over it. He goes, "This is the Stan Musial Bridge." And I'd ask him like, "Well, did you play him in baseball or anything like that?" And I don't even know how the story. He was much older than my dad. I think he was older, but so yeah. So Stan Musial, a little underrated, a little Cardinal love. Very rare Cardinal love for me, but I think and that was on a Bleacher Report list or something, and I sort of agreed with that. I started reading the stats and looking at it, and again, it goes with underrated. He gets lost in the shuffle of baseball greats, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a
We'd
good
love.
one.
I'm sure there's many varying opinions. I'd love to hear what some people think. I think like locally, I think here we don't think it's as much underrated, but I think Sergei Fedorov is much underrated in the grand scheme of the entire NHL. I think if we weren't in Detroit, there would not be as much recognition of him, I think, if he hadn't played here, and people don't realize how good of a two-way player he was, and really changed. I mean, really, I mean, Yzerman, we all love Yzerman and everything, but I mean, he really was very integral and part of those winning those cups.
Well, for sure. What's interesting with him, I think he was to many people the anti-Iserman in a sense that he, first off, he wanted to leave after and wanted
Yeah,
more money quite often. And it was tough on it because he was such a great player and he never really, he just wanted more money. But I think
yeah.
Iserman was
Who
so
doesn't?
beloved,
Who
it took
doesn't?
away from, right, right.
Wasn't that wasn't it Carolina with Carmanos? Like that was who was trying to lure him away.
I think
I
so.
thought that's
Yeah.
what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little local guy was trying to lure him away to his
Didn't he
office.
ended up in Anaheim though, right? And his career sort of,
Oh, I mean, eventually, but I mean, he
yeah,
avoided that. I think the first run at him was earlier, and it was Carmanos. I thought when he was the owner, majority owner of Carolina, the
yeah,
useless sport knowledge that we have in our
no,
heads. I mean, like,
right.
so. All right, hot mic take. What do you have for this week? Your hot
Okay.
mic take spawned into a whole thing this week. So what do you got this week?
Yeah, let's see if this one does too. So recently I was listening to some national anthems, some old national anthems, and I had a disagreement of sorts with a few folks that I was around. And it started with Jimi Hendrix's rendition of the national anthem from Woodstock. And then I played Marvin Gaye's from the 1982-ish NBA All-Star game, 81, something like that. Not long before he was horribly killed by his dad. And then I played Jose Feliciano's from the 1968 World Series. And I I think those three, Jimi Hendrix was making a statement with this. It was more of a reflection on this is where our country is right now. Marvin Gaye put a more soulful rendition into the national anthem with his, and Jose Feliciano did a more of a Latino oriented one. And I think all three are just awesome, you know. But a lot of people that I've asked the same question to prefer the old, the Whitney Houston from the Super Bowl, which her voice was, again, I've mentioned her
Yeah,
before here. She did that. It was the perfect time for the Super
amazing
Bowl.
talent.
Yeah. So I guess my hot mic is two part. Number one, what do you what is a memorable national anthem to you? And number two, are you okay with singers and artists doing their own spin on it. If you're good at the guitar, making a guitar version of it. If you're a more soulful singer, making a soulful national anthem. Are you okay with those sort of variations and iterations of the song, or do you prefer the traditional national anthem?
Good question. I mean, for me, Whitney Houston is, I mean, I love, some of her songs are just on my normal playlist. I mean, that still stands out to me. Throw out that it was a very trying time in the country. And Marvin Gaye's too. I mean, another guy that's in my playlist that you come into the library, he has a couple of tunes in our Friday
Mhm.
library playlist. Just people that I like to hear sing in general, and those two to me always stand
Sure.
out. I don't have a problem with people making it their own at all. I think it'd be, I mean, that'd be sort of boring otherwise, I think,
I agree.
so.
I agree.
Yeah. Mine is, so we've talked DT. Thankfully, it's cooled down here, so hopefully I won't get a failing score next week. My score was awful. I looked it up this morning, and it's supposed to be like under 35 kilowatt hour something per day, and I was like in the red all the way to the edge, like over 65. I was double what the poor score was. All right. But my next question is this. It's been pretty dry here. Now, it rained a little bit today. It rained a lot yesterday.
Mhm.
What's your stance on watering your grass? Do you just let it go and let nature take its course?
I do fertilize, but I let it go. I let nature take its course. It became to me, it's not worth the to keep up with the Joneses is not worth the money it costs to water the lawn. And I think if you want a beautiful, great looking lawn, you have to water, and it's just not worth it to me financially.
Yeah, and you know what's always funny, and it's the same thing every year here. April and May, it rains a lot. Your lawn is growing almost too fast in May and
Sure.
early June. Like you got to cut it almost once every 10 days,
Yeah.
right? Like I
Maybe
mean,
less than
this
that.
year
Yeah.
yeah, and then all of a sudden something happens like around June 10th, and it's like, and that's what we had basically, right? And I have an irrigation system, but I'm not one of these that just like it's set for a program where it runs every other day for so long, but I don't have it. I'm a man. I get up so early, walk the dog. I'm a manual person, but like the problem is, I let it go. You get to a certain point and you waited too long. The people
Hmm.
that water like religiously every other day, I can't justify it. And my grass, is it dead? No, but it's also not like the people that water every other day. I
Right.
couldn't imagine the water bills. I couldn't. I mean, it would be, and to me, it's not that big of a deal. Like, and of
No,
course,
I
I
agree.
manually started mine yesterday because I'm like, oh, it's been dry. And then what did it do? It downpoured
Yeah,
at
of
like 10
course.
a.m. So maybe it's like the old joke of washing your car. Maybe I should, if it starts getting dry, just run it a few days and then it will downpour on those days. So it did rain today, a little shower here midday, but I'm just curious what route people are in. Again, I walk my sub, I take a walk every morning and I can see the people that are religious every other day. Their grass looks like a golf course, right? To me, I think there's other things I'd rather. It's not going to die. I mean, grass doesn't die, right? It goes
Right.
dormant,
It goes
and I mean,
dormant.
if it
Right.
died, you'd have to replant it every spring, right? It goes dormant, and
Right.
and for some reason, like my yard on the boulevard down by my driveway, I don't know if that's just like a dry point or whatever. That one corner, no matter what I do, it's all by this time of year, it just starts turning yellow, and I can never. And it's not grubs. I don't, the yards experts out there. I get grub treatment. I don't know what it is. It could be. It seems like that spot always goes dry, and there's nothing I can do no matter how much I water. The rest of my lawn's okay. I mean, it's fine. So,
Yeah.
well, tonight's the draft. We may be going having some Diet Pepsis to watch the Pistons pick and the other teams. Is there anyone? I mean, again, there's not a lot of I guess hype about it.
No, this is largely considered to be the worst draft in a while. I love this day. This to me is, especially with as bad as the Pistons have been, this to me is one of my two or three favorite days of the NBA season. The other being July 1st, June 30th, and then July 1st when the free agency period begins, because it's just kind of a free for all, and so it creates nice drama. But no, it seems like the Pistons are going to go the direction of building around Cade and give him the max contract. So if that's the case, they got to put guys around him that can shoot the basketball. And so I just want a guy that can knock down shots. So there's a few guys like that, you know. That's the starting point. We have far too many. Our last three draft picks, while all are going to be NBA players and will have various successes, I think 2 of the 3 at least will have success elsewhere. If that's where it will happen, if it's going to happen. But all 3 guys have not been spacers at all. And so I think Cade has had, it's really hard to gauge where he is as an NBA player because of the way the game is played now. And the guys we've drafted around him just have not been conducive to his style. So I hope that we get a couple guys that could, or at least one guy that could shoot. And, we got a new president was introduced an hour late last Friday. That's, they talked about the need to have things, I's dotted, T's crossed, and the owner shows up an hour late because he got caught in traffic. It's amazing. So, that my hope is
so
just
tough.
a guy that could shoot, and we start building from here.
Maybe you couldn't find a parking spot near else.
All you had to do is call the Illiches. I'm sure they could have let him somewhere.
There's a hard time. And again, going on this week, basketball camp is going on. You guys are doing a great job with that. The basketball camp, and then that was one thing. And then the JV summer league going on at night. The girls basketball camp going on in the afternoon right now. So you guys, all the coaches that are working hard, you guys working hard.
Hey, let me say this too. I again, for all the NBA players that listen to this podcast, I really want them to come down and watch any sort of, whether K through 12 or not K through 4 through 12 basketball game. Watch how these kids react to every single call. And it might make them rethink how they act during these games.
Is it like that way in the camp games too? That like Nate's coaching these teams?
Not as bad. It's not as bad.
Is it boys? Is it boys and girls? I mean, you have Coach Torres like dropping bombs from a 3-point land and people yelling or something?
No, nothing like that. It's just the reaction like immediately. And I know in my games we're considered the NBA level, so this is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I had to tell a few today, don't worry about the refs. Don't worry. These are 9th grade refs. They don't care who wins this game. They're doing the best. They've never picked up a whistle before. No. I said it to one of the refs yesterday. I said, you can, Rodney, because he's reffing. I said, you can never complain about officiating again or officials again because you see how difficult it is. Again, Charles Barkley said it. I said it before on the show. Athletes aren't role models, and I agree. But in this instance, the way you're acting on the floor is certainly having impact on lower levels. So,
yeah. Well, there you go. Hey, one last thing before we wrap up today. I want to give Coach Sikora a final shout out as we head out. The audio complaint led us to discovering something new here on Zoom when we were looking for the options to make sure your headset was hooked up all right. That we can. When we do this and stream, we can stream right live to YouTube. And that means when we do the anniversary episode, which usually comes up, it's early in the fall, right? Like right when we started.
Sometime in November, early November, I think.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's right around the end of cross country season. We will be able to do that. So we are going to attempt that, right? This time we're going to go, we'll do it live, as Bill O'Reilly said.
Live.
We're going to do it live. We'll do it live. We'll see if it works. I mean, we're going to test it before. Like any good operation, we're not going to wait for that night. We're going to test it, maybe an episode a week earlier or something. Maybe we can get the Ren Dog on for a test. I think he'd be a good test subject.
Perfect. Why not Max Bailey?
Right. Well, why not Max
Bailey?
Or
Tom Pack, man. Record setting. You call it record-setting time on his.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about Tom Pack. Yeah, how's he going to handle a photo slideshow as we're doing it live? You have to sit there with his iPad or computer and be a guest and put the slideshow together. So
I swear I would love to be a fly on the wall.
It was another great slideshow. I'm trying to think, he had some great pictures. I just chuckle and laugh every time.
I want to be a fly on the wall as he's taking notes, because I'm sure he's giggling to himself as he's doing it. I would love to see him do this. I would think it would be great.
Oh yeah. I'm pulling it up right now. Sorry, by the way, that is right. I wanted to say this. Did you remember the t-shirt that he showed on there?
Yeah.
In the slideshow? Not family friendly.
Oh, that's
proud
right.
Proud member of the Blank Your Feelings Generation X.
Yep.
Yes. So that was.
I forgot about that. We might have to give him a demerit for that one.
Well, we're getting a little edgy on Pass the Mic here in the summertime. We're letting it go crazy here. So, all right. Have a great week, everybody. We will see you back next week.